All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Safely Extreme cast. This is for the week of September 19th, 2021. I am, of course, Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and my co-host from Nexus Games, Sharky. What I am going to be saying is apparently, I'm not sure, with an OBS update or something screwed up on my font that I chose for the chat. Seems to be borked right now. It's like giving me like a very weird font. Yeah, that is not good. Don't know what's going on with that. Well, we'll have to either readjust or keep it like this for right now. But let's get to our show this week. We are wrapping up the middle of our Secrets of Game Dev Success series. And mhm. And thankfully, we'll have, I think, maybe one or two more episodes after this in this series. And then we're going to be starting to look for more game topics or more design topics. So if you have any suggestions, let us know. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, to wrap up our secrets series, or the middle of it, we're going to be talking about, well, two very important aspects: how to prepare your studio for success and how to mitigate failure as well. Both aspects are very much about future proofing yourself as a game company. And as we said at the start of the series, that this is meant for people who are interested in doing game dev full time. So if you're looking at this just from a hobbyist point of view, something you're going to do, once in a while, you can safely or extremely safely ignore our episode today. Mhm. But for this point, this is something that, again, as we've said over the course of the series, that a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of developers don't really think about, or they don't think about as much as they should. And future proofing yourself is a very important aspect of running a studio. Mhm. And it is often the case where even studios that put out a really good game, that it gets hundreds of thousands of reviews or just thousands of reviews, some cases they could get hundreds of thousands, and then we see the studio in like 5 to 6 years they're shutting down or they've just gone completely dark. And it's very hard, as we've seen, to kind of maintain that level of success. And we really don't see too many studios who go from one mega hit to another mega hit or even something even bigger than their last hit. Mhm. Lucky. Hmm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. And this goes back to, and hey Smoke, this goes back to something that we talked about in one of the earlier parts. I don't remember which part it is, but understanding why a game did well or did poorly. And a lot about future proofing is about refining yourself as a studio. It's about understanding, okay, how can we make things better? Because if you're not improving, or you're not improving in the ways that people want you to, you're not going to be succeeding. And I mean, we can look at something like, let's see, Hand of Fate being a good example. Hand of Fate was a game that it had a very interesting hook. The first game, according to Steam, got 7,470 reviews. Now, was it the best game? No, it was not. But when we got to the sequel that did improve things, it only scored 4,306 reviews. And very shortly after, or a few years after that one, the company folded. And this was a case of games that got critically well received, but again, it the critics don't unfortunately pay your bills. And what we've seen again are cases of critical successes and commercial failures. Yeah. And a lot of developers really, unfortunately, struggle when it comes to what do you do next? You've had one game come out, and this is why a lot of people will say how important it is to get one game, fully out the door, from concept to on a store page. But if you want to succeed, and more importantly, if you want to survive in today's market, you have to be thinking more than just, I release a game, I will release another game. You need to be thinking about what does this mean from a studio point of view. Hmm. Hmm. At what year? Or what? Not really. Like it really wasn't until what would you say? Like 2018, maybe 2019 that we started to like get some cyberpunk buzz. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not the only example of that. I remember speaking to the developer of Concealed Intent. This was back in 2014, and he wanted to make a space space strategy style game. And at that time, there were no other games like it. Then we heard about No Man's Sky and Star Citizen, and all these other games came out. And his game, which unfortunately wasn't like at the top of the tier to begin with, just got buried. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Excuse me. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And to Smoke's question, is there a win and wait before next game? I don't think there is like a established, you release a game, you cannot release another game for 6 to 8 months kind of thing. But usually, if you're working on your next commercial product, it's going to take you time, no matter what you do. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And there are developers who have made a living or a decent living on very small scale games. The it may be done in 6 months. We're selling it for like 3.99, 4.99, that territory. But I just don't know how viable that market is today. And eh, mhm. Hmm. Hmm. Yep. And consumers these days are just being flooded with a lot of games. And while that may not sound like a big deal to the consumer side of things, it is a big deal for developers because it means that you are more indirectly competing with other games for people's times. And we were having a discussion before the stream regarding one of the developers we've spoken to and how his studio is being scuttled at the moment because they try to do their own take on multiplayer gameplay. And while multiplayer games certainly sell, they also try to doing it during the height of the Fortnite, PUBG, Battle Royale, takeover of that market. And it didn't work out well for them. And the problem, as we've said many times over, is that people want quality experiences. They want to enjoy a game. I know that's a very shocking statement right there. But if you have to choose between a product that is $10 and is just okay but has a lot of bugs in it, or $20 and it's an amazing experience with like next to no bugs or issues, yeah, which one would you do? Hmm. Would you? Hmm. Hmm. Yep. Hmm. Yep. And hmm. Yeah. And yeah. And we should also point out we all also aren't talking about critics who are paid or they have an obligation to play a game all the way through. I mean, again, with titles like Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, of so many Amnesia Rebirth I didn't like, that yes, the critic will sit and play a game for 15, 20, 30 hours. That doesn't mean the consumer is going to do that. And when we look at on completion critiques, my show that I do on Tuesdays, there are games where people will play a game that's maybe 20 hours long. They will play for 10 minutes and that's it. It is as quick as load it up, move a character, go, uninstall, refund, and you'll never see them again. And this is something, again, that a lot of developers, even those that I think are successful, tend to fail to realize that pain points are very real. We were playing that skateboard game on stream the other day, and there are so many, like, not like innocuous pain points, but just in your face issues that we ran into in what, 10 minutes of playing that game? And the problem is that as a developer, you're not going to hear from those people. You're not going to hear from the people who load up your game and go, I don't like this, and stop playing it. You're either going, eh, eh. But majority, you're going to hear from the extremes. The I love this game, I get to skate a bird 10 out of 10 group, or the this game is a piece of trash group. I never want to see this game ever again on my Steam library. And like, yeah, but the problem, and getting back to this point about future proofing yourself, is that you need to learn your mistakes. And if you don't learn them, you're going to keep repeating them. And more often than not, each time you repeat your mistakes, fewer and fewer people are going to be willing to give you money for it. Because again, it goes back to that question. Like, let's take Disco Elysium. Would you rather spend $30 on Disco Elysium, a Game of the Year award winning title that, people describe it as redefining, narrative design in video games? Or do you want to spend $10 on some random, very basic looking Twine game that you find on Steam with like a, you know, 5 line title as its name? And to Smoke's comment, are we having more games leading? I think part of that has to do with trying to appeal to larger markets. And we are seeing, again, that the wider you can cast that net, the greater the chance your game has of reaching more people, and ergo getting more sales. Because, like, the thing is, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm going to make a super niche driven game that is going to, be like this focus in terms of an audience, but I also want this game to sell 5 million copies. It's not going to happen. Hmm. And even Dark Souls has been trying to become more approachable with its UX. And I mean, I'm curious to see what they're going to do with Elden Ring. But mhm. Hmm. Uh, Tivoli Spike. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. And again, like people will misconstrue difficulty as part of the greatness of your title. It's how we get, La Mulana games. Or even stuff like people saying that Spelunky 2 was perfect and, it did nothing wrong. But again, but the problem when it comes to streamlining your game is that it requires you to understand that you messed up in some aspect of your game. And a lot of developers, again, don't like being told that they messed up in some way, shape, or form. Even if their game sold well, even if it did manage to break even or earn a profit, it doesn't matter if there are a bunch of pain points that you missed on. And like we've said, when it comes to kind of future proofing yourself in this aspect, pain points aren't hard to spot. They are very easy once you know how to approach a game from a UI or a UX standpoint. Hmm. Hmm. Blind spots. And it, mhm, yeah, nope. And this is why you need to bring in outside playtesters and have somebody, give your game a really detailed critique on it. And if you don't, and we often see that difference between the games that do get those critiques and those outside playtesters versus the ones who don't. Because again, like, even though it's very hard to spot these things if you don't know what you're doing, consumers know when a game pisses them off. They're going to know very quickly, I don't want to play this game. And again, you're always going to get drop off. I'm going to get up in a second and try and fix my lens flare window there. But you're always going to get people who are going to quit your game no matter what. And again, there is no goal, there's no such thing as a 100% perfectly retention in a video game. But the point that you want to do is you want to make your game as appealing as possible. You want to make sure that if somebody hates platforming and they buy your platformer, you're not going to convince them to stay around. But if somebody is looking for a new platformer, they buy your game, you want them to have an enjoyable time. You don't want them to load it up and go, "This is horrible. I can't control my character at all. I'm refunding this game." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There we go. The game design rainbow. All right. I will head over there for a second and try and fix this. So while I'm doing this, any other points regarding future proofing that you want to discuss? All right, I'm back. Hmm. 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 And this is why, for a lot of developers, we see like the whole YOLO. After they've had one decent game, they try to go even bigger with their next game. You need to understand not only just what the market is, but also what you're capable of doing. And there is no shame in focusing on small games when you're starting out. Your first game shouldn't be trying to take on No Man's Sky or Star Citizen. And you need to be able to consider, again, if this game fails, am I out of a livelihood? Am I done? And it's a tough question for a lot of people to answer. And again, part of this is the passion of the game industry that, you're going to do it at, below minimum wage because you want to make this game. And if it succeeds, well, it's like, having your big break in Hollywood. But the studios that have managed to survive, and when we say survive, we're not talking about releasing one game every 10 years. We're talking about studios who can consistently put out great products that will earn back their production costs, and they keep the lights on the studio. So, mhm, any employees. Hmm. Yeah. And one of the problems that we've seen with developers when it comes to hedging your bets like this is that they're not really thinking about what their next game is going to be. Now, while you're working on game number one, should you be designing game number two? No, but you should. Yeah. Hmm. Mhm. 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 But you need to have a future plan. You don't want to just think about your studios. I'm just going to make one game, and that's going to fund myself for the next 20 years. It is very rare for one game to do that well. We're talking AI Wars 1, Minecraft, Factorio, and those are more of the exceptions to these rules. More often than not, as we've said, your first game will probably fail. Oh, I think sharks. Okay, there you go. All right. So, what were you about to say? Okay. But when you're trying to think about your games along these lines, you have to be considering what can you reasonably do for your next game. And this is why we've said on many of our previous episodes that once you've kind of found your genre, whether it's an action or abstracted based design, you typically want to stick with that and grow in that area. You shouldn't go from making a first person shooter to a turn based RPG, then go from a turn based RPG to super high stakes 3D action game. Mm-hmm. Mm. So more like mixing genres then. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mhm. And if you don't have that, you're not really, again, starting from your best foot. And it's just very hard as you're trying to build your next game or build something experimental. Again, it's why research is a very big point about this. Without understanding what people expect from a game or expect from a genre, you don't like a big part about planning for future success is understanding what the market wants. Now, again, if you're making something completely new and original, or at least experimenting in certain aspects, you can't get 100%. But like we've said, if you're building a platformer, or you're building an RPG, or you're building a deck builder, I expect you to know what people like and dislike about those genres. Because if you don't, then how are you supposed to make one that's going to appeal to those specific groups? You're not. And we've seen plenty of games that have said, oh, we're going to combine, gotcha design with action games, with visual novels. And we often end up with a game that is a worse example of all three of those genres. And you don't want that. Like again, like if you're mixing genres, you're not going to get the extreme fans of either genre. That's just not going to happen. But you want to get the people who are at least somewhat interested in them. Hmm. And that's a. Mhm, mhm. It would be like telling like 50 different car builders, build me a car that the only condition is it's red. You're going to get 50 completely different ideas of what a red car looks like. And that's kind of the beauty and the nightmare about game design is that, again, you can tell somebody, build me a platformer. We'll get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different platformers. But how many of those are going to be good platformers? That's going to be a. Mhm, mhm. When the jumping feels bad. Yep. Hmm. Yeah. And to the follow up, they are different, very subtle aspects. And like one of the things, as we've said, is that implementation is king when it comes to game design. Outside of you literally just taking somebody else's IP, which you shouldn't do. Again, there's a reason why I don't cover a lot of like fan games and stuff like that here on the channel because fan games don't have a long lifespan, unfortunately. You can make the best damn Metroid. It doesn't matter when Nintendo's lawyers come down upon you. But the implementation, though, is what is often what defines these games. That if you can make a look at Fortnite, for instance, Fortnite versus PUBG. When Fortnite blew up, they basically made a better PUBG, and it worked really well for them. And again, this is why it's hard to compete in spaces when there is that 800-pound gorilla. Because how many developers today could, on day one, release a game that is better than Fortnite? Just like how many developers could have released day one a better game than World of Warcraft, circa 2007, 2008? How many could do with FTL or Darkest Dungeon? or Celeste or anything like that. And in a lot of cases, you can't. And this is why you need to look at how to be different. How can you, if you want to make a Mario like platformer, how can you be different from Mario? Not necessarily. Yep, go ahead. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. And it. Mm-hmm. 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 Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Who's been quiet this whole time? Uh-oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, and again, while Shark is fixing that, like, implementation is ultimately going to be the biggest factor. And
Test, test.
uh,
Okay, there we
yep,
go.
I can hear you. Like, there's this whole minor controversy regarding what was it, a Donut Country? This was a indie game that, let me see, was it called Donut Country? Yeah, Donut Country. That somebody, a mobile developer, made like a multiplayer, completely like match-based version using a similar look to it. And the developers were worried that people weren't going to buy his game, that they stole his idea. But the problem is that again, that at the basic level, you can't copyright or trademark or infringe on mechanics. Because Nintendo made Mario means nobody else can make a platformer. You can, of course, infringe on IPs. You know, putting a, I don't know,
Mario.
Yeah, putting Mario in a game, putting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in a game without, and then trying to sell it. But when you're trying to create an idea for a game, it really comes down to, or trying to create a successful game, it really comes down to just, what can you do with it? And this is why you can have 10 different platformers or 10 different deck builders or whatever, and they'll be completely different games of completely different qualities.
Oh, I've got an idea. All right, check out this game idea. I'm going to make it. This is my game idea. It's a platformer where you jump around with a decent bit of speed, but not like a whole lot. It also stars a character that is a anthropomorphic animal kind of thing,
Mhm.
and you go around and collect a bunch of things that will maybe give you extra lives or maybe nothing kind of thing. Let's make that game. I mean, how many
Mhm.
thousands of games did I just 100% nail with that idea? I mean, that
Y-
idea is like a ton of games.
mhm. You just gotta go fast.
Yeah. And I mean that's Mario, that's Sonic, that's Banjo and Kazooie, that's
Don't forget the greatest platformer,
Crash.
Bubsy.
Yeah, that's Bubsy. That's what
How
what's
many
what's some other games that is?
how many people watching this actually know who Bubsy is? I am really dating myself.
Or the train wreck that Bubsy was. I mean, there was a Bubsy remake recently.
Hmm. Oh, I know. How many people know Gex?
Yeah.
There we go.
But
But
like
a
that
quick
that
time.
idea would be all those games, and the difference between those games on that idea is how they executed on them.
Hmm. Yep. One platformer, one RPG, one strategy game can be completely different. Look at Age of Empires. The differences from what we see between Age of Empires 2 to what we're playing with Age of Empires 4. They're both real-time strategy games. They both involve always be villagering, but they are different at the fundamental level. But again, the important caveat, we're talking about franchises. Like we're talking about, multi-million dollar names and franchises like being built like that. And for most indie devs, and I'm sure for most of you watching this, you don't have a multi-million dollar IP in your back pocket.
No, I might, but as
And
for
as a
sharing your devlogs and stuff, you don't need to make devlogs. You can if you want to. You don't need to.
mhm,
It's not a key part of marketing or anything like that. Sharing screenshots, getting feedback is important. You definitely need to get feedback, and sharing a screenshot. I mean, what's somebody gonna steal from that besides like dissect it and steal some of your art? I mean, but like number one, you'd have to have a really good art for them to even want to do that, and number two, most people aren't going to do it. Most, I mean, like if somebody shows me a screenshot of something really pretty, I might download it and use it for reference because it's like I really like that. What can I create that can take the parts that I like from that and use them in my own art, kind of thing. You know.
and there are going to be people we've seen companies who will rip off a game.
Yeah,
Instead of it's called Hades, it's called, I don't know, Haters or
that's a Chinese ripoff.
Hades.
See,
Yeah,
we're,
and
we're, we're mostly the games you're referring to are the games made in China, and at that point, stealing games and all that stuff, they're not going to steal stuff while you're still working on it. They're going to steal it after you get done with it.
yeah,
So
and
there's nothing you can do about it other than take a flight over to China, find the person who did it, and do something very illegal over there. And
mhm,
good luck making it out of China after you do that.
yeah.
Good luck
I
making it out of China,
feel.
period, after getting over there because China's China.
Mhm. As a quick time check, we are hitting an hour. Do you want to spend maybe another 15 minutes talking about preparing for failure and then wrap things up?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get to the second point, or we'll spend a little bit more focus on this, and that is preparing for failure. Because you are going to fail at some point at a game company, whether it is because your game, because your game is not good. Maybe you fail on marketing. Maybe you failed because you released your game the same day that Call of Duty came out.
Maybe your game
Something.
failed because Steam decided to throw a surprise Steam sale right before you released
Mhm.
and
I
didn't tell
believe
anybody
this.
about it.
Uh, you should be at the point that the screenshots are as best as they can be.
I would say it
Because.
depends because it depends
Mhm.
on if you're doing hard marketing or soft marketing,
Mhm.
which depends on where you're sharing it at. If you're sharing it at places where people will be biased towards you, aka your own Discord, you know,
Mhm.
on a Discord where you're friends with people, you know, on a game developer site where game developers are helping game developers on a your personal YouTube channel, things like that are all soft marketing, and you share it as soon as possible,
Yeah.
basically, and get feedback on it. Now, when you're talking about hard marketing, you're talking about like any place where anybody that cares absolutely nothing about you can see it. We're talking about Twitter, Facebook, Reddit,
Steam
um,
store page.
yeah, the Steam store page, you know, like number of other places, any of those places, you should not be showing your stuff until you have the most polished, finished
Mhm.
version of your stuff, and you shouldn't even be showing that until you're in your hard marketing phase in the last, probably
Mhm.
6 months of development, and that should be part of your hard marketing campaign
Yeah.
leading up to release.
And as another very important pro tip, if you're doing hard marketing, there should be no temp art. There
No.
should be no placeholder art in anything that you show. There shouldn't be, uh, version alpha 0.007 in the corner or, Bandicam, screenshot at the top.
Nope.
Like when you're doing your hard marketing,
It should be all
this is
professional.
yeah, this is the professional time.
Yep. And
And,
so the best time to do soft marketing is all the time. The best time to do hard marketing is 6 months before release, roughly. It depends on the game because, could be
Mhm.
shorter, could be longer, but roughly 6 months. And after release.
Yeah. I actually got a bit of a challenge for you.
Mm-hmm.
What when do we consider this for Kickstarter campaigns? Because I actually have a friend who's preparing a Kickstarter for a game that's coming, or he's doing a Kickstarter in like the coming month or so. Like, if you're talking about like Kickstarter project, how does that timeline change, or does it change at all?
That's a hard one because it all depends on how you're doing your Kickstarter. You know, I'm not a Kickstarter expert, so take this all with a grain of salt. If you're going to do like a lot of Kickstarters do, and that's use Kickstarter for marketing kind of thing, you want to do that's when you're doing your Kickstarter during that last 6-ish months when you're doing your hard marketing, and it'll be an extra bit of funnel for your thing to amplify all your other resources kind of thing. you know and if you're in the hard marketing phase, then you're only putting out hard marketing. Now, if you're doing it the other popular way of this game is nowhere near done and we don't have money to finish it kind of thing, Kickstarter probably isn't going to be able to give you enough money to finish it, to be honest. But like, let's just say you're going that route kind of thing. Then you would probably have to do a short phase of hard marketing that is just hard marketing your Kickstarter, not your game itself. You know, you're promoting, you know, come support our Kickstarter over here, and when but that's going to be very hard because if you don't already have a Discord community built up, if you don't already have, a a YouTube channel built up, if you don't have community bases built up at that point, which through your self marketing, which you probably haven't done at this point, then you're pretty much guaranteed to fail because according to what seen the other day from one of the top people at Kickstarter kind of thing, she said that basically 30% of the funds come from Kickstarter, from people on Kickstarter. The other like 70% come from the community you've already established. So if
Yep.
you have not established a big community at that point and, a big enough community to actually 70% fund yourself, then going to Kickstarter probably ain't going to do you any good.
Yep. It's the same thing that I've learned the hard way with Patreon. I've had a Patreon for about 6 years now, and it hasn't really grown because, for one thing, like being on Patreon, just like being on Kickstarter, doesn't magically grant you money.
Nope.
Just like putting your game on Steam doesn't magically guarantee it's going to be a success. You have to do the work outside of that. And this is again why it's important to factor in failure. You need to be thinking, what is the worst possible scenario? Could it be, my game doesn't do well, so we'll move on to a next one? Could it be, I'm now going to be homeless because I can't pay my mortgage? You have to be very attentive as to, the highs and lows of your game. And for a lot of studios out there, they're not really thinking about that because eventually the money is going to stop. There's only so many people who will buy Factorio or Minecraft or spend money in Fortnite or anything along those lines. And you need to consider what's going to be next and can you succeed even if it fails?
Yeah. Here's an interesting thought I just had.
Hmm.
If 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 what she said is right about only 30% come from the Kickstarter audience and 70% comes from your own audience.
Hmm.
Well, when you pay all the Kickstarter percentages and everything else, I believe you lose like 50% of your money. So, I mean, in theory, you would gain more money by not going to Kickstarter and just starting a PayPal and saying, hey, my community, donate so I can make this game. And in theory, you would have 20% more money than what you would for Kickstarter, and you wouldn't have to pay for the rewards.
Or
So,
I've heard people like Indiegogo, and I don't know what their rates are compared to Kickstarter.
Indiegogo, I believe they bid for ownership of the company, stocks, basically.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
they're giving you ownership of the company.
Hmm.
So they get, it's a rev share of sorts.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, like it when you're using Kickstarter as a marketing tool, though, in that last few weeks, few months of
Hmm.
of of time, kind of thing, I think that while you're only going to get like, you're going to be losing such a big percentage, kind of thing, from your community and
Hmm.
everything. What I think what you gain is a snowball magnification effect, to where,
Hmm.
like say you're running ads on YouTube, you have your Steam page, you have your other media outlets kind of thing, and all of those are kind of each kind of bringing their own piece kind of thing. But then when you have Kickstarter, that's a whole nother piece that then Kickstarter can magnify this one, that can magnify this one, that can magnify this one. So Kickstarter can magnify the three, that would then all three magnify Kickstarter kind of thing. So it could exceed what you could naturally raise at 70% of whatever you had. Because basically, in a sense, it's like when a YouTube channel does a collab with another YouTube channel kind of thing, then those two YouTube channels normally build up each other kind of thing. Because like, you know, if YouTube creator A normally gets 1,000, let's say 10,000 views on their videos, and YouTuber B gets normally 15,000, then what you'll probably see is YouTuber B is going to get now 20 or 25,000, and YouTuber A is going to get now 20 or 25,000 kind of thing, because they're not taking views from each other. They're rather adding to each other kind of thing. And when you add a whole new source to that, think about it, the more sources you have, the more those sources are going to add into the other sources, which is going to then have all those sources add back into it.
Yeah. And since we kind of got a little bit off topic there, uh, w- like when you're trying to build everything up around your studio like this and factoring in failure in that aspect, you have to again be considering just what is your plan B? And I remember when I spoke with Chris Parr from Arkin about this, and he's been very candid about how many failures Arkin Games has had following AI Wars. And I think part of his problem, and part of the problem that I see a lot of developers get into, is that they don't want to, either they don't want to or they can't, improve on why something is failing. Like when I looked at the games, like when I looked at Arkin's track record following AI Wars 1, there are issues with each and every one of those games that instead of trying to rectify or improve on, they just try to do something else completely different and then create a whole new share of issues. And really going back to the first part of this week's show, you have, if you want to prepare for success and mitigate any failures, you have to understand why something is not working. You can't just bang your head against a wall and hope that the wall is going to break down at some point. And a lot of people, when it comes to understanding their own designs, tend to slip up on that factor. It's why, again, that for somebody like me, I can look at a game that you spent 5 to 10 years of your life designing and spot just about every one of your UI and UX issues within 30 seconds of starting that game up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also have to realize that when you're releasing a commercial game, the first commercial game is pretty much guaranteed to fail. It's it's pretty much written in stone. And you pretty much don't want it to not be written in stone. You kind of want to fail on your first game. And here's the reason why. When you don't fail on your first game, you fail to learn the reasons why your game was not good, which leads to the problem you just were talking about with them just continuing adding stuff rather than fixing stuff that was messed up. And,
Yep.
And when you go down that path kind of thing, you're going down the path of death. It is, most of them don't get to make a third or fourth game kind of thing. They make the second game. It was just, the same bad parts of the first game, just with more bad parts and more good parts,
Yeah.
more of
And
everything. And it's just a path to failure.
and
Permanently.
here's a very sad but truthful fact. Developers who go on Twitter or talk about, my game didn't do well, I need help. And all their developer friends will boost their game. They'll say, "Oh, I'm going to buy it." That doesn't mean anything to the consumer. The consumer doesn't care that you're sad that your game isn't selling well. They don't care that you spent 10 years of your life on it. And part of, again, growing as a developer is trying to fix the issues of your game.
Hmm.
Now, if you're making like multiple different genres and you're doing complete different experimentations, you don't necessarily have that same kind of carryover from game one to game two.
Although you might in the case of Lazy Bear Games.
Hmm. But again, people don't, and I think this is kind of like our mission statement, or here's like our main point for this week's show. People don't want to play bad games.
They
They
don't even
don't
want to
want.
play alright games. They don't even play good games. They
Hmm.
only want to play great and amazing games. And great games are pretty shit to them, to be honest.
Hmm.
That's the truth of today's market. Just make good
Hmm.
games kind of thing. Don't make a good game. People will absolutely rip the hell out of you, even if it's a good game with good aesthetics kind of thing. It's not going to be good enough. It needs to be
Hmm.
great or amazing. Now,
Yep.
you can make a great or amazing game that is on the low budget side, that is shorter kind of thing. There's no problem with that. But you do have to nail your art aesthetics. You do have to really make a really good game.
And I would also add, if you are going to make a short game, a 2 to 3 hour long game, don't be planning a 5 to 10 year budget for that game.
No.
And this is also why this is one
Not
final
unless
point
it
I
takes
want
you
to make.
5 to 10 years to get $100, few $100 for the budget.
And this is my final point that I want to mention, and I'm going to stop talking because we'll really go over time. We keep going. Another major aspect about mitigating failure and understanding success, you need to understand project management and studio management. And I think we'll be talking about community management for our next part. Is that right, Shark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So,
final part of this long, long
mhm,
series.
yeah. So project management is, again, it's the boring parts of running a studio. It's understanding that, okay, how long would it reasonably take me to do this? And it's not just saying 6 to 10 years. It's about understanding what is actually going to be the nuts and bolts of this game and how do I put this together? Because you need to be able to understand this stuff. There are so many soft skills that are oftentimes the difference between not this isn't so much about game success and failure, but studio success and failure. Being able to manage people, being able to actually plan out a game's development. And planning game development is very, very hard.
Yeah, if you manage your studio the same way Blizzard has, you're going to be in trouble.
In maybe 6 to 10 years.
Well, probably sooner than that, seeing how you're a small indie.
Yeah. But also, if you think to yourself, oh, I'm only going to need $30,000 and 2 months to finish this game, and it turns into a 3 year project, somewhere the wires got crossed.
Well, the thing is whatever time you think the game is going to take, it's going to take a lot longer than that. You know,
Always budget at least 2 to 3 times, I would say.
yeah, like I know the last game, Chromasia, we, you know, like okay, we'll spend a year on this. Took us 2.5 years.
Hmm. And again, quality takes time. No one is going to be able to build a Mario competitor in 6 months. Just like you're never going to be able to compete with Slay the Spire, that I think had like a 3 or 4 year development cycle. I'm not 100% sure on that top of my head, but
However, you can make a Mario-like game, a
mhm,
platformer game that looks decent and performs decent in 3 days. But there's a massive difference between that 3 day version and that 3 year
mhm,
version.
or that 5 year version. And you have to be able to understand just how far you can go with these game ideas. If you're trying to compete with Rocket League or Hearthstone or Mario or Hades, you need to understand that there is a market for that game, but there may not be a market for games like it. And if you think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to spend double the money and double the time that Supergiant did on Hades, and my game will turn out, twice as successful, that's not going to be happening.
Josh is firing shots at Neon Continuum now. Games like Hearthstone.
But the game industry is a very tough market. And very few of the developers, even the ones who have amazing games, survive more than 5 to 10 years. And this is why, like for myself, I don't care if you just made Option Not Included, or if you just made Factorio or Minecraft. I want to see your entire studio's portfolio over how many years it's been out there. Because that is often going to be what tells us if a studio is going to survive long term or not. Because if all you've done is made one amazing game and 10 horrible games, you're probably not going to be surviving in the next 5 to 10 years of that.
Yep. But if you see that they have progressively made better and better games
Mm-hmm.
every year, or in general made better and better, and you know maybe all 10 of them are all right kind of thing, and then they have a big hit of
Mm-hmm.
success kind of thing. You're like, okay, they've been growing, they've been getting better
Mm-hmm.
over time. We can see that this studio is probably going to continue to get better.
Yeah. You don't want to see that the studio's getting worse. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes that's because they've had that one amazing success and they never really understood why people didn't like their game, or they never had that massive failure, so they kept trying to chase that lightning in the bottle again and again, and it didn't work for them.
And
It's
another part is accepting feedback, because when you get
Mhm.
that big success and everything, you're bombarded with feedback kind of thing. And at that
Mhm.
point, you kind of have to turn a lot of it off. And when you're turning any of it off, or a big portion of it, you're probably going to turn off everything that is not, oh, this game is the greatest thing ever. And
Mhm.
at that point, you're not accepting any feedback.
Yep. And again, it feedback in this aspect, it supersedes how many copies your game sold. It supersedes how many, Game of the Year awards you got, or how many, events praise your game. Because we've seen games that have like an entire page worth of, winner of 2019 award, best concept, best art, best whatever of all these different like little award factions, and the game still turns out, being a bad title
Mm-hmm.
because problems don't go away even if your game succeeds.
Where the awards taste like wine.
And I guess here's my final line. At the end of the day, the game industry is a fun business, but it is still a business.
And it's
And
also a very insanely hard business. It is
Mhm.
the Dark Souls of businesses.
Yeah.
It
Or
is
the
it is
people.
everybody who does not get good,
Hmm.
which will be probably 99.9% of developers, you're going to fail. And
Yeah.
it's going to be the 0.1% that get good and succeed. And not even
And
all those succeed in a way that they make millions of dollars. Most of those just succeed
hmm
enough to make their next game, which
or
allows them to
break
succeed
even.
enough to make their next game, which allows them to
Hmm.
succeed enough to make the next game. And it's just a chain of, we're stringing along to keep on making games kind of thing, rather than we're actually making money to go bigger or better or anything like
Yeah.
that. They're just making enough money to continue. Where
And
and any even smaller percentage of those is the ones that make a lot of money.
yeah. And those ones that do massively succeed, people from the outside will never understand again what they did to succeed. They'll theory craft until the cows come home. YouTubers will make dozens and dozens of reaction videos and hit pieces and whatever. But unless you actually work at that studio, you won't even have a molecule or, a percent idea of why that game worked and why another game didn't. And
Unless you
even
interview the developers.
yeah,
And then you'll
and
have a
even
small
then,
percentage.
they may not even understand why their game succeeded. We've seen that before.
Yeah.
And
But you'll certainly have a lot better inkling.
yeah, and this is why, we're doing this series as a mission statement to try and illuminate all the potential aspects of why a game can succeed or fail.
Yeah, it's the how to succeed at game development, you know, all into a miniseries put together
Hmm.
to tell you how to succeed, or
Yep.
how to succeed. And when that
Hmm.
comes in as how to succeed, how to, it's not like if you do all these things, you will succeed. It's if you
Hmm.
don't do all these things, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail horribly.
Yep.
It's like this is a checklist to give you a chance, kind of thing,
It's
a
like
real chance.
it's like going into the wilderness. You can, if you won't go into the wilderness with, no clothes, no tools, and just, forage around, there's a chance you could survive. There's also a chance you're going to die very quickly.
And that chance
But,
is almost 100%.
yeah, but
And what
if
this
you go,
series is a checklist to
mhm,
bring your knife, bring a tent or some kind of shelter,
bring
bring
clothes.
some, bring some water, bring some food. Here's
Hmm.
a book that tells you what food that you can scavenge from your area in the wilderness. Here's a
Or
book
berries
of,
not to eat.
you know, here's a water purifier.
Hmm.
Here's a bunch of fire starting methods. Here's a whole bunch of this stuff. But even with all that, that means you have everything you technically need to survive. But will you be able to? The chances are still pretty low.
Or there's
But
a chance that you could get struck by lightning and just die right there in the wilderness.
yep. But without all these things, your death is almost imminent, and that's what this series is to
Hmm.
if you follow these things, your death is not imminent. Your death
You
is
have
just
a greater chance.
yeah. You have all these tools at your disposal that now you can go forward and at least have a fighting chance. It's not a good fighting chance because you go out in the wilderness, you encounter a bear or a pack of wolves, these tools, more than likely you're going to die.
The Wolf
But
Among Us.
you might not. Yeah, the wolf
All right.
among us. But
Uh,
these tools will give you a fighting chance to
hmm.
help you succeed at game development. So, you know,
Yeah.
doing these things will not make you succeed at game development, but it'll give you a fighting chance where not doing them will almost guarantee your death.
Yeah. And again, we've seen developers who don't do all this stuff and they succeed. Just as we've seen developers who do all this stuff and they end up failing.
Hmm.
It unfortunately is the gamble of what it means for game development. You can
But
have your game fail, and then one day you get the Among Us success.
yeah, but the ones we've seen succeed often have that one success, and then they die right after.
Yeah. What we want and what you should be striving for is consistent successes. So
Hmm.
it's not just, 10 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 5 out of 10. What we would like to see is maybe, 9 out of 10, 8.8 out of 10, 9.2 out of 10. We want to see that you are able to consistently do great games because that's how you build company trust. That's how you build branding. And it's why people really care about the next Nintendo game or the next game from Clay Entertainment, or they used to care about the next Blizzard game
They still
because
do.
just in a different way, I think, right now.
Well, I mean, some people just still care about it in the same way because they don't
Hmm.
inform themselves
Yeah.
or
But
care.
the point is that there's a reason why we say that success breeds success and why failure breeds failure. If you keep doing things right, you're going to keep improving and you're going to keep growing. If you do things wrong, you're going to keep making mistakes. You're going to start shrinking your audience. And then suddenly, the game that you expected to sell, let's say 80,000 copies, you may get 20. You may get 5. And you're going to be left there scratching your head wondering, well, why is my game not selling? I just did the same exact thing on my last game.
And I want to go back to our analogy here with the, going out into the middle of the woods with, you go out into the middle of the woods with all these tools and you fail, you die kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But you die, like 5 days in kind of thing. And you think about it and you get all this feedback and you figure out what caused me to die, what points did I steer wrong, so that the next time on your next life when you go out there on your next game you have that extra knowledge there that will help you survive longer and
Wait,
better.
so is real life just a roguelike?
Well, game development is a roguelike
Okay.
because game
But
development you have multiple games. As long as you can,
mhm,
as long as you can keep the studio doors open, you will have multiple
mhm,
games that will go out there and go through the roguelike.
yeah. Do you have 7 days to die?
Yeah.
All right. But let's end things here for our show this week. I think that's a great point. So, again, as a preview for our next episode, we're going to be talking about community management, all the fun parts of interacting with your consumer base or not interacting with them. So, be sure to tune into that. We'll be doing that show next Sunday. Uh oh. Hopefully, Shark isn't too quiet.
Mhm.
I may
You
have
might
to
have.
adjust Shark's volume as well when I do the editing.
Yep.
But be sure to tune into that next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to catch our show in the inquiries, where we'll be reviewing Steam store pages, we will be doing that Mondays at 4 p.m.
Yep. And be sure to lick the smash button, smash the link, smash the link button on both Josh's and my channel. And also join my Discord. I'm making a game right now, Neon Continuum. It's a grid-based CCG that is based around sci-fi, particularly a good bit of cyberpunk in there. And it's going to be a really cool game. And if you join the Discord, you can come and play it once a month at the monthly dev chats, as well as more often in surprise doses. But
All right.
and links to everything, my channel, Josh's channel, my Discord, Josh's Discord, all the links are down in the description of both Josh's video and my video. And I don't know if you have this in your video or not, Josh, but I know I have all the links to the previous parts of the series of this How to Succeed at Game Dev.
In the recordings, yes. In the live shows, no.
Okay, I have it in both.
All right. So With that said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.
See ya.